It was September 2006, and I found myself sitting in a New York City Starbucks waiting for someone I'd never met before. A couple months earlier, I quit my job at a big Manhattan law firm and decided to set out and explore new career opportunities. In doing so, I jumped feet first into the New York City tech scene. I started attending tech meetups and going to networking events, trying to just get to know as many people in the space as I could. In the process, I met a computer programmer who, after hearing my interests, offered to connect me with another person that he had recently met that was in a similar exploratory phase of his career. So I accepted. And here I was, sitting at this Starbucks, waiting for this person, Dan, to arrive. About 15 minutes after I got there, Dan showed up, we exchanged pleasantries, we grabbed our $5 cups of coffee, sat down, and had what ended up being the first of dozens of conversations at this same Starbucks where we swapped business ideas, shared resources, and generally supported one another in our entrepreneurial efforts. My relationship with Dan over the next 7 years really influenced much of my subsequent business success and really solidified my belief in the power of a strong network. My name is Duane. I'm an extrovert. I love meeting new people. Over the last 35 years, I've accumulated a lot of education, and my wife hopes that this is my last degree, and I promise her. But in the process, I've really come to appreciate that my education has only done a little bit to bring me to this point, to influence my success. The people I know and those in my network really have brought me here today. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not always what you know, it's who you know. In fact, I imagine that most of us here in this room today are at the GSP because we share this sentiment. A lot of us were probably motivated to come here to broaden our professional network. However, while we may recognize the value in a strong network, sometimes we don't always know how to do it well. For introverts, networking can be a terrifying proposition. It can be paralyzing. Networking situations really can be hard to get through, and they need a lifeline to pull them along. For extroverts like me, networking also has its challenges. I, for one, sometimes am a little too confident in networking situations, and that has caused me to step on some landmines along the way. So over the last 15 years, I've spoken with hundreds of students and professionals about networking, and in the process, identified a few strategies that I've seen others use that I've tried to employ myself. Some of these are lifelines that have helped me through situations and that I think would help introverts through similar situations. Others are landmines that I unfortunately have stepped on from time to time. So I hope you'll let me share a few of these with you today. Probably the most fundamental thing about a networking interaction, the first thing that I try and do is establish a common connection, a similarity. People like to be around those who are similar to them. For introverts, I usually do that sort of early. For introverts, the lifeline here is identifying something early in the conversation, something you may have in common with the other person, and establishing a connection on that. Whether it's you've traveled to the United Arab Emirates, or you've worked in microfinance, as Harsh and Rob have, or whatever it may be, find that connection early, establish that similarity, and it'll make you memorable for that person. It's something that I value. The landmine here for extroverts is being a bit too confident or too comfortable or making assumptions too early. I used to have a colleague who was recently divorced and would start out engagements or interactions by mentioning that fact, thinking it would engender sympathy. Let's just say it was a bit awkward. Next, be centered. Be focused. Be in the moment. All too often, we're in networking situations and there's a lot else going on. In fact, just last evening I was having coffee with Camilla and we were in Town Square and there were so many people walking around that I would find myself sort of looking over her shoulder, glancing around. The landmine, that's a real landmine. Don't take your attention from the person that you're engaging with. Don't wave and nod at someone walking by. It shows that you're not really in the moment. Lifeline here for introverts could be taking in the person's name, remembering their name, appreciating who you're talking to, and using their name in the conversation. It will show that you care and that you're in the moment and you're focused. In addition, listen to their story. Why are we in these networking situations? We're in these networking situations because we want to broaden the people that we know and who's going to add value to our careers and our lives. So you want to know how this person's going to be able to add value to you. You want to listen to their story. And sometimes it's hard for people to tell their story. So the lifeline here is, ask questions, sincere questions. Draw out their story, their expertise. Identify ways that they'll be able to add value for you. The landmine here, as I've been known to do in the past, is asking too many questions. This is a conversation. It's a networking interaction. It's not an interview. And on occasion, I may have veered into the realm of interrogation. Definitely not an interrogation. I've been talking to people who've hit me with like gunfire questions one after another. It's a little bit of a turnoff, and I know I've done it myself. So it's something to avoid. In addition to listening to their story and seeing how they can add value to your network, you want to make it clear how you're going to add value to their network. Why do people network? Again, it's to see how they can broaden their influence and the value that people can add. So in speaking with someone, a lifeline here is telling your story, getting it into the conversation, talking about your experience, your expertise, your education, the different things that you know that may be valuable to them. The landmine, of course, is telling your story too enthusiastically sometimes. Sometimes talking about your expertise and your experience can come across as bragging. We've all talked to people who early on in the interaction with them, they talk about all the great places they visited and the houses they own and the cars they own and all this expertise they have, and it can be a bit of a turnoff. So be mindful of that. Fifth, just as important as starting out the conversation by establishing a similarity is bookending the conversation with a follow-up. A lifeline, and following up and following through. A lifeline here for the introverts is trying to identify something in the conversation where you can add immediate value. Think of when you're talking with a person, think of a way that you may be able to make a connection for them straight away, much the same way that computer programmer did with me and Dan 7 years ago. If you can add value immediately, do it. If not, you can add value soon after, do that as well. One thing I like to do is if I'm reading a newspaper article or seeing I see a product that I know someone in my network may be interested in, I'll go ahead and send it to them. In fact, just yesterday, Sabrina and I met with the COO over at Evernote, and it was a great meeting. It was for a class project. And this morning in the Wall Street Journal, there was a quote from the co-founder of the co-founder of the charter schools, KIPP Charter Schools, saying how he loved Evernote. It was his favorite app, and it was the one he used all the time. So what did I do this morning? I shot an email off to the COO saying, hey, look, you got a nice shout out in the Wall Street Journal this morning. It shows people that you were in the moment, in that networking engagement. You're thinking about them, and you're being mindful about what they may need, and you're showing how, again, you can add value. Following through is super important. We've all been in situations where someone says they're going to do something and they don't. Someone says they're going to call and they don't. That doesn't work in the dating world, doesn't work in the networking world. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. Follow up, follow through. So these are just a few strategies to help make networking situations, one-on-one networking situations, a little bit easier. But big picture, networking isn't transactional. It's not about numbers. It's not about how many LinkedIn connections you have or how many Facebook friends you have. Networking is about building real relationships, relationships where you add value and the other person adds value for you. I didn't know 7 years ago when I sat down with Dan for that first time that the conversations we were going to have and the ventures we were going to work on together would one day lead me to stand here today. But they did. And the relationship with Dan and dozens others over the years have put me in a position to be able to speak with you this morning. For some of you in the room who may be a little more shy, I hope some of these landmines that I discussed will help make the next networking interaction for you a bit more comfortable. For some of you who are extroverts and maybe a bit overzealous like myself, I hope talking about some of the landmines I've stepped on will prove cautionary. In the end, when we're finished with the GSB, we'll all have accumulated a lot of education. We'll all know a lot. And although that education will take us a certain distance, the people we know, those in our network, the relationships we've built, will determine our ultimate success. Thank you.